secrets of storytelling are to be found herein, and some of my favorites await at Hyperion Studios.
Hi, I'm Don Hahn, the producer of Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and I'm here at Disney's Animation Research Library, where researchers from all over the world come to study the artwork and the documents that we create in the making of Disney animated films. You know, there's over 60 million pieces of artwork here in this building, so there's always a possibility that something new and previously unknown might show up. Today I want to share with you what we think is an absolutely remarkable discovery. In the process of doing research for this diamond edition of Snow White, a really unique piece of Snow White history was uncovered. It was in this box that there was a folder that contained a small bunch of story sketches, the first of which said, Snow White Returns. Further investigation led to finding more story sketches, enough to see the arc of a storyline. Sequel to Snow White? Could it possibly be? A press release from the Disney studio prior to the completion of Snow White relates that the artists working on the film were so convinced of the appeal of their characters that they were begging Walt to put these newly created characters into upcoming productions. So what about these story sketches for Snow White Returns? When were they created? Why were they made? A very likely theory is that these story sketches for Snow White Returns were created after the movie was released, and that it was probably intended to be a short rather than a full-length animated feature. We do know that following the amazing success of Snow White, that there was a great demand from the viewing public for more cartoons with the dwarves. But we also know that two major sequences that were developed for Snow White were deleted from the final film. These two sequences happen to figure really prominently in the story outlined by these newly discovered images. The soup-eating sequence was dropped from Snow White in November of 1937. Walt cut it, even though he loved it, because he felt like it just slowed down the story. The bed-building sequence was the second deleted scene. This sequence is a series of gags as each of the dwarves and some of their animal helpers build parts of the bed in their own unique ways. Ward Kimball was the directing animator on both the bed-building and the soup-eating sequence. He often said that Walt Disney gave him the character of Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio as a consolation for the months of work he put into these sequences that ended up on the cutting room floor. Perhaps Snow White Returns was considered as a way to make use of these near final but beautiful animations. Whatever its history, it's still fun for us today to reconstruct these storyboards for Snow White Returns to see what might have been. In the following presentation, we've included abbreviated versions of the scenes that exist in pencil animation, but you can also see these deleted scenes in their complete form by selecting them from the menu. Now here we go. Let's take a look. Following the title card, you see the seven dwarves marching off to work, singing a song, undoubtedly hi-ho, hi-ho.
Hi-ho, 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 it's home from work we go. Hi-ho, hi-ho, hi-ho.
And then we cut to a long shot of the dwarves marching off to work. A bird appears in the sky carrying something in its beak, and the bird swoops down over the dwarves and holds the piece of paper in his mouth right in front of Doc's face. And Doc takes the paper out and takes a while to kind of focus on it. And now that he's focused, we see what he sees. Dears, I'm coming tomorrow for my annual visit, Snow White. Doc tells the others that it's a letter from Snow White. And they're all overjoyed with the news. One of the dwarfs says, we'll have to give her a surprise. And the dwarfs all agree, yeah, a present, a present. And they sing and dance around, a present, we're gonna give her a present. Well, one of the dwarfs asks, but what'll it be? And the other dwarfs echo, yeah, what'll it be, what'll it be?
Why don't we make her a bed?
That's it, a bed, a bed.
The dwarfs say, there it is, finished. All of a sudden, an enticing smell wafts through the air, and Dopey receives the smell in kind of Morse code. Led by their noses, the dwarfs follow the scent to the cottage, with Dopey taking up the rear as he always does. They look through the window and see Snow White, and she's cooking. And they race to the door, and they're like really thrilled, and they burst into the room. Snow White greets them all and gives Dopey a kiss on the forehead like she always does, and of course he blushes like he always does, and all the dwarves laugh. The scent of cooking soup draws the dwarves' attention. And they look back to Snow White for permission, and Snow White nods her head, and that's all the signal they need. So, after all the excitement, Snow White says, well, don't you think that's about enough for tonight? And suddenly Doc remembers, but wait, we have a surprise. They tell Snow White to stay put, and they leave the cottage. One of the dwarfs pops his head back in and tells her not to peek, and she assures him she won't. She covers her eyes with her hands. Outside, 6 dwarfs position themselves to lift the bed. Grumpy just stands aside watching. And Doc says, all right, together now, men. Ready, set, go. They strain and strain, but the bed doesn't move. And Grumpy harumphs, well, a fine bunch of petunias you turned out to be. Your bed's still growing. They look up at one of the bedposts and see a fresh little sprout coming out of the top. It's only then that they realize that the tree trunk from which the bedpost is carved is still rooted in the ground. Yes, sir, we forgot to cut it loose. What do we do about it? Better start sawing, Grumpy says. Well, meanwhile, Snow White is waiting patiently in the cottage. Oh, and she yawns. I wonder where they could be, she says. Night's fallen. The dwarves haul the bed to the front door of the cottage, and Doc admonishes them. Easy now, men. He opens the door, and they all rush in and yell, surprise! Their jaws drop as they survey the room, and it's empty. They tiptoe in, and to their great surprise, she's gone. Where is she? I don't know. They look around, even checking under the rug, and one dwarf, looking through the bedroom door, calls to the others, look! We cut to Snow White asleep across the dwarves' beds. The dwarf who looks through the door calls down to the others, she's asleep! The other dwarves come upstairs and see Snow White sleeping peacefully. They leave the room quietly, and Dopey closes the door behind them. But one of the dwarves is left behind, and in hurrying to leave, he smacks right into the closed door. The other dwarves yank him out, and they say, shh. The dwarves hold a conference at the foot of the stairs to determine their next plan. Grumpy sarcastically suggests, well, why don't you bring her out to the bed? One of the other dwarves suggests, well, maybe we ought to just surprise her in the morning. In the background, Sleepy is already getting tired. And he pokes the mattress. And they all say, yes, let's surprise her in the morning. And at the word morning, they all scramble for their places in the bed. Dopey's trampled in the rush, and he gets up from the ground and he sees the other 6 dwarves nestled comfortably in bed, taking up the entire mattress. So Dopey runs all around the bed looking for a spot to sleep, but there isn't any. He finally dives under the blanket from the foot of the bed. As he worms his way up, another dwarf falls out of one side of the bed. That dwarf gets back into bed, which squeezes the dwarf out the opposite side. This cycle of one getting in and forcing the other one out goes on for a long, long time. And kind of perplexed, the animals from the woods watch this really odd scene of dwarves repeatedly getting squeezed and out and in. We then cut back to the bed where now we see 6 dwarves sleeping side by side with Dopey sleeping at the head of the bed, spread out across the pillow. We iris out. The end. If we know very little about why Snow White Returns was started, we know even less about why it ended up in this box. Whatever the reason, we're lucky to have discovered this missing piece of history from the golden age of Disney animation. So thanks for joining me here at the ARL. See you next time.
From across time and space I clearly see the Hyperion studios yet await thee. Return to the time when the story Master. Welcome back. Prepare yourself to be amazed once again, for I have many tricks up my sleeve, despite the fact that I have no sleeves. Now would be an excellent time to choose from one of...
In terms of cinema, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is undoubtedly a milestone. In terms of Walt Disney and his studio, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the cornerstone. Because everything that followed, all the cartoon features, the live action features, the theme parks, everything that Disney went on to do was built on this one film.
It's the ultimate adventure in film production at a time when to do an animated full-length film was absurd. This guy said, you know, we're going to do this thing. We're going to do it.
This was a very risky venture. If Snow White failed, the studio would have failed.
Everybody thought Disney was out of his mind for even attempting a feature-length animated film. The trades were calling it Disney's folly.
And he proved, despite the critics, that in fact it could be done.
How many people loved this film, saw this film around the world? It's an extraordinary story. Even just the story of the making of the film itself, it's an extraordinary venture. One of the great American success stories of all time.
When Snow White was released, people immediately realized the importance of the movie. That doesn't always happen with a film. Sometimes a film gains importance as time goes on. But the day after the premiere on December 21st, 1937, Walt was getting wires from various notables in the motion picture industry saying, this is one of the most important pictures ever made.
One of the critics who reviewed the film when it first opened compared it to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. And I think today that may seem extraordinary, but that is exactly how important Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was.
Isn't it bright and shiny?
Oh, it's beautiful.
It changed everything, of course, for animation, but also in terms of live action too. Opening up audiences for fantasy films, I think, you know, it's reverberated through the years.
But at the time, nobody believed that anybody ought to do a cartoon that would be a full-length thing. And I had many people tell me when I was working there that, who wants to see a full-length cartoon?
The very idea of sustaining an hour and a half with animation, how could that be done?
Because we were told by all the big movie moguls in Hollywood that it was okay 6-7 minutes like the shorts, but an hour and a half, no way. Big reason was that you run out of funny things to do, so you had to have a laugh a minute. And the bright colors would hurt your eyes. Everybody get up and walk out.
What must Disney have thought? What must the people who worked for him have thought when the trade papers were talking about this film as though it was born to be a disaster?
Walt called us all back one night, and he went through the whole story, telling everything, acting out all the parts the way he would do it. And we were sold. So I don't see how you'll ever finish it, but gee, it's sure a great idea. And we all put our heart into it.
Just whistle while you work, and cheerfully together we can tidy up the place.
Very typical of Walt Disney. He kind of plucked a figure out of the air. They would cost about $250,000, he thought. Very rapidly, they realized that that wasn't going to be sufficient, and it escalated to $400,000.
His brother Roy handled the finances and probably tore his hair out most of the time because Walt was always pushing for more and more perfection.
It wasn't about making money at that time. It was about being better, getting better, and being the best that they could be.
This is somebody who has a passion to do this as well as they can possibly do it.
Snow White is the most deliberated upon movie of all time. We're talking roughly 4.5 years of almost total devotion by Walt Disney. And the budget keeps on growing and growing and growing.
Everything had to be tackled head on first time round, and that's why it's amazing. Everything about the film was groundbreaking.
Jiminy crickets.
The characters had to assume real personality in a way that they'd never had to do before.
What's the matter? Can't tuck your tongue?
Both vocally and visually, they had to live on the screen and make us care about them.
And please make Grumpy like me.
When Walt started Snow White, he had his core of animators who had animated the shorts. So there were a handful of superior animators. But Walt quickly realized he was going to need a whole core of new animators if he was going to get this through.
10 people were working in that studio in 1928 when Steamboat Willie was premiered. By the time Snow White was happening, people were saying, we've got to have another 300 artists.
It was a kind of, a call to Mecca. Come to Mecca. We're doing great things here, and we need you. And that period attracted, some of the most famous animators in the history of the Walt Disney Studio, all of whom came to work on Snow White in various capacities. So you had this tremendous infusion of talent that was just aching to do something, and also learning how to do it on Snow White.
Well, the time was 1935. The Depression was on right down to the rock bottom. So a lot of us were out of school around this period of time. And the only person who was advertising for artists was Walt Disney.
You have to realize that what things were like in the Depression times. People were starving to death. And so it was a boon to be able to find a place where they would hire you and ask you to do your very best work, the very best that you could, and actually train you at the same time. And he was trying to teach us to be good enough artists to do what he wanted to do.
Well, I went there because there was a depression on at the time, which influenced the growth of the studio more than probably any other single factor.
You can say the times gave him more talent, but to me, the difference between Walt and some of the other cartoon producers was that Walt felt it so strongly inside. He wanted to do nothing but the very best that he knew he could inspire out of a great group of artists.
There was a tremendous pride in the place because of the fact that Walt was always trying to lift you up higher with all the classes and the films. He was always asking you to observe and study things, and there was constantly an effort to raise your standards, and you couldn't turn us off. We were excited about it.
But at the same time, we didn't think the studio would last more than another week. It was exciting and it was fun. Sure had a great collection of artists and stimulating people around you. But you couldn't believe that anything like Snow White would go over with an audience.
Hello? May I come in?
Now, the stretch run of Snow White is really, really interesting because it is a stretch run. I mean, they're galloping full speed. Walt had not finally settled on even the names of the dwarves until less than a year before the release of the movie. So they're working full throttle trying to get this thing out in time for its December 21st release. They're worried that they're not going to do it. They're worried about what's going to happen if they don't do it.
I mean, most animated features on the average take about 4 years to make the movie, but at least nowadays we know that the rewards can be great. I think when they did Snow White, they really didn't know what the end result would be. The downside could have been the end of the studio. So while the future looked potentially bright, it also could be potentially tragic.
When you get the right voice and you animate to it and develop a character, you can't imagine any other voice being with that. It'd be like changing your voice, your mind. It makes a different personality out of you.
Now, don't tell me who you are. Let me guess.
Walt really wanted to get distinctive characters, and working in the world of vaudeville, he was able to bring in many actors who had specialties like sneezing or a funny laugh, and all of these added to the characters.
But he also was interested in a fairy tale quality, particularly in the voice of Snow White herself, and he kept searching for that voice quite a bit.
Oh, you can talk! I'm so glad!
Adriana Casalati was a young singer and had opera training. Her father was a music teacher in Hollywood, and she auditioned for the part along with about 100 other actresses, and she seemed to have that fairy tale quality, that strange, otherworldly quality that Walt Disney wanted for the character of Snow White.
My father was a singing teacher here in Los Angeles, and one day one of the Walt Disney representatives called his studio and asked if he knew of a little girl who could sing and speak like a child. And I was listening in on the extension phone upstairs, and I said, "Papa, how about me?"
Why, I believe you're lost. Oh, please don't cry.
The voice of Snow White is a beautiful, lovely, innocent young girl.
And is unique in a certain sense in that there are two performances kind of glued together and married, the animator's performance and the actor's voice performance. And it's really fun to watch how they interact on each other, and the animator adds something to the character voice, and the character voice gives the animator ideas that he might not have had otherwise.
I see you haven't seen. What do you see? You see?
Hello, I'm John Ratzenberger. You know, Snow White is the foundation for so much that the Disney Company has done through the years. Let's dig into the nuts and bolts of what has made Disney tick throughout the decades. The story of the Walt Disney Company is connected to a classic fairy tale about an innocent girl and her 7 loyal friends. I'm speaking, of course, of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Some say that Walt Disney had the story of Snow White in mind even at the beginning of the Disney studio. In 1923, he partnered with his older brother Roy to produce the Alice comedies. The Alice comedies were about a young girl lost in a fairy tale landscape, facing danger and meeting strange and comical creatures. Sound familiar? They were a hit, and the studio continued to produce short cartoons. A big breakthrough for the art form of animation happened when Walt Disney gave the world the first cartoon with synchronized sound, starring a little fella named Mickey. It's hard to believe, but just a decade later, Walt Disney astounded the world with the first ever feature-length cartoon, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. A story told so well that it's won the hearts of audiences decade after decade. Here's a trailer early audiences saw where Walt Disney himself personally introduces those lovable dwarfs.
The picture that every newspaper and magazine critic is raving about. Hear what the usually hard-boiled reviewer of Time magazine says. Snow White is as exciting as a Western, as funny as a haywire comedy. It combines the classic idiom of folklore drama with rollicking comic strip humor. It is an authentic masterpiece. More than 250,000 paintings like these were created by Walt Disney and his staff of artists to make the most daring adventure in the history of motion picture, with new and amazing characters. Snow White, warm, human, the lovable 7 dwarfs. But let Walt Disney tell you about them himself.
Dwarfs' names fit their personalities. This pompous-looking individual is Doc, the self-appointed leader of the group. And this little fellow is bashful. He's secretly in love with Snow White. And this funny face is Sneezy. He has hay fever. And old droopy eyes is called Sleepy. And Happy here with the beaming smile. And old Sourpuss here is Grumpy, the woman hater. And last but not least is Dopey. He's nice, but sort of silly.
I'm Roy Disney. The 1930s were heady times at the Walt Disney Studios out on Hyperion Avenue in the Hollywood neighborhood of Silver Lake.
In the world's film capital is the studio that stands as a monument to the great genius of Walt Disney, master of a new form of popular art that has captivated millions of moviegoers. With the antics of his entrancing animated cartoon characters, he has built an enterprise that employs 700 skilled and highly specialized artistic workers.
The characters that Walt and my dad had introduced had become worldwide celebrities. Mickey's pal Pluto, for instance, made his debut in 1930. Beginning in 1930, Disney books, comic strips, and other merchandise became part of daily life for millions of people around the world. In 1933, the Ingersoll Watch Company sold the very first Mickey Mouse watch. Walt Disney and the hundreds of artists who worked with him had transformed the medium of cartoon animation from a crude curiosity to a vital art form. Part of this evolution came from Walt's insistence on technical innovation. In 1932, for instance, Walt pioneered filmmaking in the new full-color Technicolor process and won his first Academy Award for it. Walt sought a sense of depth and realism in animation that led to the invention of the multiplane camera, which he tested in his successful Silly Symphony animated shorts. In addition to the mechanics of technical innovation, Walt insisted that his artists keep challenging their own talents. In 1932, Walt even formed an after-hours art school at the Disney Studio to train his animators.
In any action drawing, there is a simple key. It is a line of action. Trust me. In this rough drawing of Mickey, that line is the basis of the action and was drawn first.
The result was a new kind of personality animation and a level of acting that elevated the cartoon to equal status with live-action films. A good example is Three Little Pigs, which debuted in 1933, Academy Award, and spawned a hit song as well.
Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Big bad wolf, big bad wolf.
This musical success confirmed Walt's instinct that good music was...
Hello, everybody. I'm Angela Lansbury. The success of Snow White in 1937 was beyond the wildest dreams of even Walt Disney. It was the first blockbuster of the sound era and an international sensation. Back in Hollywood, this success enabled Walt to build an all-new animation studio in Burbank, which was completed in the spring of 1940. But there were dark clouds gathering over the world, and their shadows were beginning to fall on the Disney studio.
I can move. I can talk.
The releases of the ambitious and expensive Pinocchio and Fantasia in 1940 proved financially disappointing, in large part because the war in Europe had cut off vital markets overseas. In the interest of promoting goodwill closer to home, in August 1941, Walt and a group of his artists were sent by the U.S. government on a goodwill trip to South America. Dumbo was released and was a smash success. The very next morning, December 8th, 1941, the U.S. Army moved onto the Disney studio lot. Though work was finished on Bambi, which was released in 1942, the primary business of Disney became the war.
In Hollywood, Walt Disney has turned over almost the entire facilities of his studio for the production of Army and Navy instructional films, some of them involving closely guarded military inventions and techniques.
Let's go with Navy Project 648, Sequence 1. Let her roll.
Military insignia, training films, and morale-boosting propaganda became the business of Disney. It's no surprise that this wasn't a very profitable business. And as the Disney bank accounts dwindled, Walt and his brother Roy began to feel a little panicked. The Disney studio needed a big box office hit. Roy realized that they had a film that could make a return. There was a whole new generation of filmgoers who had never shared the adventures of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Hello, folks. I'm Fess Parker. The theatrical re-release of Snow White in 1944 had reversed the declining fortunes of the Disney studio and established a tradition of reissues of all the Disney animated features.
Am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America?
Disney had survived the war years, and Walt continued to move forward in his expansion of the definition of Disney. 1950 saw the release of Treasure Island, Disney's first completely live-action feature.
You got the word of Long John Silver.
That year also marked Disney's debut in the new medium of television with 1 Hour in Wonderland, the studio's first television special.
Television?
Whoa, steady, old boy. Take it easy.
Television? Ah! I have never been so insulted in all my unborn days.
Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp continued the Disney tradition of animated storytelling. Disney also introduced audiences to the nature film with the True Life Adventure series, an idea so revolutionary that Disney had to set up its own company to distribute the film. The success of his first TV special encouraged Walt to make a big commitment to the new medium. The next few years saw the TV debut of the Mickey Mouse Club.
Hey there, hi there, ho there, you're as welcome as can be. M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E.
And the first airing of an anthology program called Disneyland. This wasn't just a TV program, entertainment product, and to acquaint the public with an exciting new project that Walt was cooking up.
I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
A destination theme park, also called Disneyland, which had its grand opening in the summer of 1955.
Hurry, 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 there's no time to spin and worry. Check the castle, fill the lake, or see for goodness sake. Make a rocket that's exciting, a boat trip that's inviting. The time is ticking fast and we've got to finish fast, but we'll be there when they open Disneyland.
One of the great hits spawned by the Disneyland TV show was the tale of a stalwart fella named Davy Crockett. Adventures caused a national sensation.
Out of the night, when the full moon is bright, comes a horseman known as Zorro.
A few years later, the debut of Zorro caused a similar, if somewhat smaller, commotion. Walt hadn't turned his back on the movies, though. 1954 saw the debut of the spectacular 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Walt's first and only science fiction feature film. As the decade wound down, production was underway on another ambitious animated feature, Sleeping Beauty, as well as The Shaggy Dog.
Shake on it?
Certainly I'll shake on it, Wilby.
The first in a series of a new kind of comedy that would become a staple of the studio for the next 2 decades. As Walt ended the decade with a slate of new projects in media both familiar and innovative, a special old friend came back for another visit.
Hello, I'm Robbie Benson. The Disney studio started out the 60s with a box office bang. According to the show business newspaper Variety, Disney had 3 of the 5 top-grossing films of 1961, The Absent-Minded Professor, Swiss Family Robinson, and The Parent Trap. Walt continued his commitment to new technology by taking the lead in presenting his weekly TV series in the new medium of color television, changing the title to Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color.
This whole program is being seen in color. Huh, and that's a lie. You know that's a lie. Because only the people with color TV sets is seeing it in color.
What plans for the future do you have at Disneyland?
Well, there's a little plaque out there that says, as long as there is imagination left in the world, Disneyland will never be complete.
In 1964, Walt produced 4 hit exhibits for the New York World's Fair, shows that enabled him to expand the technology about to celebrate its 10th anniversary. In late 1964, an achievement in movie making, the film was a huge critical and commercial success. It became the #1 box office hit of 1965, and it was nominated for 13 Academy Awards. It won 5 Oscars, including Best Actress for Julie Andrews.
Oh, this is lovely. I know you Americans are famous for your hospitality, but this is really ridiculous.
And Best Song for Chim Chim Cheree. Now, although only a few people knew it, at the same time, Walt was looking at large tracts of property in Florida for a secret project he was planning. He even made this film in 1966 to explain the Florida Project.
We know what we hope to accomplish. And believe me, it's the most exciting and challenging assignment we've ever tackled at Walt Disney Productions.
The animation department was still hard at work, too, putting the finishing touches on the Jungle Book.
How interesting.
And over on the sound stages, production was in progress on another splashy big-screen musical, The Happiest Millionaire. Then, in December of 1966, a tragedy. Walt Disney died. The world mourned his passing. The following year, Snow White returned for a 4th triumphant re-release. And although Walt Disney himself was gone, a whole new generation was introduced to the magic of Disney.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dean Jones. Just like the 60s, here at Disney, the 1970s started off with a huge hit. The live-action comedy The Love Bug had roared into theaters and across the finish line to become the nation's #1 movie.
Nice going, Herbie.
In the summer of 1970, the studio established the Walt Disney Archives to collect and preserve the historical materials relating to Walt Disney and the company he founded. Down at Disneyland, the 100 millionth guest walked through the gate. And in Florida, Walt Disney World opened with a huge celebration. The Florida Project was seen through to its completion and dedicated by Walt's brother and business partner, Roy, who passed away just a few months afterward. 1973 saw the celebration of the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney Productions. In movie theaters, Disney was the king of comedy, with several hit films featuring college student Dexter Riley, and favorites like the Apple Dumpling Gang.
How much money you figure that dude's got in front of him? About 500. 500? Wow. You know, that'd be, that's 200 apiece.
Escape to Witch Mountain.
You two got powers beyond belief.
We're not doing this. This is something too powerful for us to do.
And Candle Shoe.
Get up out of bed in the morning with your dukes up, you know? Got him up, first punch is yours. I see.
There were the big screen musical fantasies, Bedknobs and Broom.
Elliot. Elliot. My dragon.
And the animation department delivered the Aristocats.
Everybody wants to be a cat.
Robin Hood.
I owe my life to you, my darling.
I couldn't have lived without you, Robin.
And the Rescuers. And in the middle of all this, 1975 saw the return of an old girl who continued to prove that no matter her age, she was still the fairest in the land.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jody Benson.
The 1980s will long be remembered as an era of optimistic growth and aggressive investment. And the Disney studio was certainly in rhythm with the times. The decade began with booming business in the Disney parks. Disneyland celebrated its 25th anniversary in 1980. At Walt Disney World in 1982, an ambitious new kind of discovery park, Epcot, opened its gates. And in April of 1983, Disney's first international park, Tokyo Disneyland, opened. Back in Burbank, 1981 saw the establishment of Walt Disney Home Video. The Disney Channel began broadcasting in 1983, and the same year saw another triumphant return of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
What's your name?
It's hard to say in English.
Well, just say in your language.
All right. My name is...
1984 saw the release of Splash, the first movie under the studio's new Touchstone banner, and Donald Duck celebrated his 50th birthday. In the fall of 1984, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells were named chairman and president of Walt Disney Productions. This dynamic duo brought with them a fresh perspective on the Disney legacy and an aggressive plan for stimulating Disney's growth.
Whoa, whoa. What is now going on in the studio?
Yes, who?
Donald Duck.
No.
Goofy. Then you're Roger Rabbit.
Oh, sure. Come on, get real.
Okay, I give up.
Fooled ya!
Vigorous production at the studios led to hit after hit, both on television and in feature films. Walt's nephew, Roy Edward Disney, assumed the role of vice chairman of the board.
Smile, everyone.
And kept an eagle eye on revitalizing the famous animation department, which also led to a string of sensational hits.
What I want from you is...
your voice.
My voice?
You've got it, sweet cakes. No more talking, singing, zip.
Other areas of the company were growing too. In order to better reflect the company's increasing diversity, in 1986, the name Walt Disney Productions was changed to the Walt Disney Company. Part of the growth and diversity was reflected in the opening of the first Disney store in Glendale, California. Within the following decade, there would be more than 600 stores worldwide. Michael and Frank also spearheaded an unprecedented expansion of Walt Disney World Resort. The 1980s saw the opening of Disney MGM Studios, Pleasure Island, and dozens of hotel and resort amenities throughout the Florida property. And in the midst of this amazing expansion and unprecedented growth, the studio even found time to celebrate the golden anniversary of one of its most important stars.
Coming this summer to theaters everywhere.
Hey, look!
The motion picture event of the year.
What is it? Why, it's a girl.
The 50th anniversary of Walt Disney's timeless classic, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Come celebrate with the fairest of them all, the merriest of them all, and the scariest of them all. It's the golden anniversary of Snow White, Sleepy, Doc, Bashful, Happy, Grumpy, Dopey, and Sneezy.
We gotta save her!
Whether it's your first time or your 50th, now is the time to experience the magic of the most beloved animated motion picture of all time.
A true story.
A love story.
Where we will live happily ever after.
Walt Disney's classic, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Opening July 17th in 42 countries worldwide.
Hello, I'm Ming Na.
The 1990s continued the expansion of the definition of what was Disney around the Disney studios. Some things would succeed, others would fail, but all would be attempts to keep Disney vital, important, and moving ahead. New Year's Day of 1990 saw the beginning of Hollywood Records, and the following year saw the first book from Disney's new publishing group, affectionately named Hyperion. In May 1991, the Walt Disney Company joined the Dow Jones Industrial Average. In April 1992, Disney's second international theme park opened, Disneyland Paris. Disney Studios films continue to diversify with the acquisition of Miramax Film Corporation in June of 1993. And speaking of diversity in entertainment, October 8, 1993 saw the inaugural game of Disney's NHL hockey franchise, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. In movie theaters, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs returned for its 9th theatrical release. Only this time, Snow White sparkled as never before in a full digital restoration. The 1990s brought continued success in animation, The Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. And in June 1994, the blockbuster release of The Lion King. In April of 1994, Disney's very first Broadway show, Beauty and the Beast, opened at the famed Palace Theater and went on to receive 9 Tony Award nominations. And for the first time, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released on home video and, not surprisingly, became one of the all-time bestsellers. The 1990s were only half through, and the studio that Snow White built continued to grow and prosper. On February 9, 1996, the ABC television network and all its broadcasting and publishing entities became part of the magic of Disney. Disney made a commitment to the revitalization of New York's famous Times Square, officially opening the new Amsterdam Theater in April 1997. A few months later, the stage production of The Lion King opened there, taking Broadway by storm. The show went on to win the Tony Award for Best Musical. Disney's commitment to sports continued with the 1997 opening of Disney's Wide World of Sports Baseball Stadium at Walt Disney World Resort, and the 1999 purchase of the Anaheim Angels baseball team. In the summer of 1998, the Disney Magic cruise ship departed on its maiden voyage. In August of the following year, she was joined by the sister ship, the Disney Wonder. In 1998, the 4th theme park on Walt Disney World property opened to great acclaim, Disney's Animal Kingdom. The succession of animated features that had begun with Snow White continued with the releases of Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. And although that connection was nearly 6 decades ago, the 1995 smash release of Disney and Pixar's Toy Story caused one critic to remark, "It creates the kind of enchantment that must have surrounded Snow White." That smash success was followed by another Disney-Pixar collaboration, A Bug's Life, as well as the blockbuster sequel, Toy Story 2. The decade closed with the amazing world premiere concert tour of Fantasia 2000, a continuation of the 1940 classic Fantasia, a film that, like the Disney studio itself, never would have existed without that first success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
The greatest animated motion picture of all time is back in theaters.
How do you do?
How do you do what?
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
The Queen! Snow White! We gotta save her!
This summer, come celebrate the wonder, the romance, and the magic of Walt Disney's all-time classic.
we will live happily ever after.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, still the fairest of them all.
Hi, I'm John Ratzenberger, and welcome to my favorite decade, the decade of the 2000s, the widescreen decade. To kick off the new millennium, Disney brought back Snow White in a new form, a Platinum Edition DVD. Once again, the old girl was a big hit. Another big hit for Disney has been the Parks and Resorts. 2001, zip right out of the gate. They added California Adventure and Downtown Disney. And that same year, Disney Television, pow, adds ABC Family. A bunch of Disney movies made a splash early on. Dinosaur, Atlantis, Remember the Titans, and The Emperor's New Groove. This decade saw the rise of Disney's interactive studios. You know, those video games, those things you used to play at the pizza parlor for a quarter. Well, now there's a whole new generation of games you can play in your own home. Disney has always sent movies overseas, but in 2002, Disney brought Spirited Away to theaters in the United States. That film won an Academy Award in a newly created category, Best Animated Feature, a category that wouldn't even exist without the very first one, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. All right, here's a pop quiz. What do the following have in common with Spirited Away? Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and Wall-E. Time's up. Well, you're looking at them. Did a little voice acting in each one of those babies. Every one of them Oscar winners, but who's counting? In fact, I've done a character voice in every Pixar movie to date. I love those guys. They're part of a long tradition at Disney of kicking into high gear when it comes to animation. For example, in the 2000s, you've got Disney digital 3D technology breaking new ground with Chicken Little, Meet the Robinsons, and Pixar's first 3D viewing experience, Up. Avast, arg, aye, me mateys, yo-ho, and such. Yeah, that's right. It was the decade of pirates, with a little series of movies called Pirates of the Caribbean. In November of 2007, theaters got enchanted. Here was a movie that borrowed from the fairy tale traditions established by Snow White to tell a very modern story. Enchanted had 3 Oscar nominations for Best Song, just one of the many musical hits for Disney this decade. You've got your Hilary Duff, Camp Rock, some Hannah Montana, some Jonas Brothers, your High School Musical, your High School Musical 2, and High School Musical 3 senior year. Now, I've been known to bust some wildcat moves myself from time to time. The Muppets, who became part of the Disney family in 2004, even won a Grammy with their album, The Muppets, A Green and Red Christmas, in 2008. Oh, also in 2008, the Lion King Broadway musical celebrated its 10th anniversary. Other productions like Mary Poppins, The Little Mermaid, and the High School Musical Tour are building on its success in bringing Disney magic to live theater. As the decade came to an end, a new restoration of Snow White was completed on Disney Blu-ray, and the new generation got the chance to enjoy the magic of this Disney classic.
See through. The one that started it all. Make a wish. I wish. I wish. And take a violet. And I'll be perished in the land. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now available on Disney DVD and video. Who wins? I summon thee.
If sparkling gems tickle your fancy, then I'm surprised you haven't played the game Jewel Jumble. And I thought you were fun